The stale scent of burnt coffee and grease clung to the air in the diner, a perfume Eleanor Vance had come to associate with freedom. Here, she wasn't Eleanor, heiress to the Vance global empire, a woman whose photo appeared in society pages with captions about her impeccable taste and calculated smile. Here, she was just Ellie, the new waitress with weary eyes and a name tag that was perpetually crooked. The isolation was the point. She polished the already gleaming chrome of a napkin dispenser, her reflection a distorted stranger she was slowly getting to know. The clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation were a shield against the echoing silence of the penthouse she'd abandoned. A small crash, followed by a gasp, broke her reverie. A little girl, no older than 6, stood wide-eyed beside a puddle of spilled chocolate milk, her father's hand hovering uselessly over the mess. "Oh, Maya, I'm so sorry," the man said, his voice a deep, gentle rumble. He knelt, his large frame making the space around the small booth seem even smaller. "Are you okay?" The girl's lower lip trembled. "It's everywhere." Ellie was already moving, a damp cloth in her hand. "Hey, it's just milk," she said, her voice softer than she'd intended. She met the man's eyes, dark, steady, and filled with a tired apology. "Accidents happen. It's the official drink of every kid in here." He offered a grateful smile that seemed to momentarily erase the lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. "Thank you. We'll get another one." "It's on the house," Ellie said, wiping the table clean. She looked at the little girl, who was now staring at her with profound solemnity. "And for you," Ellie added, pulling a wrapped straw from her apron, "a magic wand. It only works on new milkshakes, though." The girl's face split into a brilliant grin, a sudden sunrise that warmed the entire booth. "Daddy, she has a magic wand." The man, Marcus, as Ellie would learn his name was, simply shook his head, a look of profound gratitude on his face. "Thank you, Ellie," he said, reading her name tag. He had a presence that was both powerful and quiet, a stillness that seemed out of place in the diner's constant motion. From that day forward, Booth 4 became theirs. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, Marcus and Maya would slide into the worn vinyl seats, and for an hour, Ellie's carefully constructed isolation would be breached by the sound of a little girl's laughter and the quiet warmth of a good man's smile. It was a disruption she found herself desperately beginning to crave. Their visits became the anchor of Ellie's week. She learned their order by heart: a grilled cheese for Maya, cut into triangles with no crust, a black coffee, and a cheeseburger for Marcus. She learned that Maya loved to draw and would fill napkins with pictures of lopsided suns and three-legged dogs, which Ellie would dutifully hang by the register. She learned that Marcus worked with his hands, his knuckles often bearing the faint, clean scars of a man who fixed things. Their conversations were small, islands of connection in a sea of polite service. They talked about the weather, about a funny movie Maya had seen, about the surprisingly good cherry pie the diner served on Fridays. But beneath the surface, Ellie felt a current of something deeper. She saw the way Marcus watched his daughter, with an attention so total it was like a physical shield. She saw the way Maya would lean against him, her small hand resting on his arm, a silent transfer of trust and love. One rainy Tuesday, the diner was nearly empty. The world outside was a wash of gray, and the rhythmic drumming of rain against the large plate glass window created a cozy, intimate atmosphere. Marcus and Maya were finishing their meal when Maya, who had been coloring a picture of a rainbow, looked up at Ellie with her unsettlingly direct gaze. "Ellie, why are your eyes sad sometimes?" The question, so pure and unfiltered, struck Ellie with the force of a physical blow. She froze, her hand hovering over Marcus's coffee cup. She could feel his gaze on her, not pitying, but curious and kind. "Maya Bean," Marcus said softly, "that's a very personal question." "But they are," Maya insisted, not with malice, but with the simple insistence of a child stating a fact. "Like the sky before the rain comes." Ellie forced a smile, the muscles in her face feeling stiff and unfamiliar. "I guess I'm just a little tired sometimes, sweetie." Marcus met her eyes over his daughter's head. "She's an observer," he said, a quiet apology in his tone. "She sees things." He gestured to his own calloused hands resting on the table. "I fix things, old watches, radios, anything with gears and wires. She watches people." "What's the hardest thing you've ever fixed?" Ellie asked, grateful for the change of subject, latching onto it like a life raft. He considered this for a long moment, his gaze distant. "A music box. Belonged to my wife. It stopped working a few years ago. The mechanism was delicate. Took me a month of nights to get the tune to play right again." He didn't say more, but Ellie understood. He wasn't just talking about gears and springs. He was talking about memory, about loss, about the painstaking work of putting a broken melody back together. In that moment, the wall around her heart, so carefully constructed, developed its first undeniable crack. She saw a man who understood the value of repairing what was broken, and she felt a desperate, unfamiliar pang of hope. The rain continued for days, a relentless curtain that seemed to wash the city clean. The diner remained their sanctuary. As the weeks bled into a month, the quiet space between Ellie and Marcus filled with unspoken understanding. He never asked about her past, and she never offered. Yet, she felt more seen by him in their brief exchanges than she had in a lifetime of society galas and boardroom meetings. He saw Ellie, the woman who remembered his coffee order and knew how to make Maya giggle. He didn't see the Vance fortune, the burden that had shaped and shadowed her entire existence. One particularly slow afternoon, as Maya was engrossed in a new coloring book, Marcus began to speak, his voice low. The rain tapped a gentle rhythm on the roof, a soft percussion for his confession. "I was in the army," he said, his eyes fixed on the swirling cream in his coffee. "For 10 years, it teaches you how to build walls, how to compartmentalize. You put the bad stuff in a box and you don't open it." He paused, taking a slow breath. "When I came home, I thought the hard part was over." Ellie leaned against the counter, polishing a glass she'd already cleaned twice, giving him the space to continue. "My wife, Sarah, she got sick while I was on my last tour, fast. By the time I made it back, she was—" He trailed off, the words catching in his throat. He cleared it, his jaw tight. "She held on long enough for me to get there, long enough for me to promise her I'd take care of our little girl." He looked over at Maya, who was now humming to herself, blissfully unaware of the weight of her father's words. A wave of love so fierce and pure radiated from him that it was almost tangible. "Everything I do," he continued, his voice regaining its strength, "it's for her. The repair shop, this quiet life. It's all to build a world for her that's safe, that's whole. After Sarah, Maya is my whole world. She's the reason I learned how to put things back together." Ellie's heart ached with a profound, unfamiliar empathy. She thought of her own father, a man who built empires but couldn't build a home, who saw her as an asset, a successor, a name on a trust fund. Marcus had lost everything and built a world from the pieces. Her father had everything and had never once tried to build a connection with her that wasn't based on a balance sheet. "You're a good father, Marcus," she said, and the words felt utterly inadequate. He finally looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers, and in them she saw not just sadness, but a resilient strength that took her breath away. "I try to be a good man," he replied. "That's the foundation for everything else." That conversation shifted something fundamental between them. The tentative connection solidified into a bond of mutual respect. Ellie found herself looking forward to their visits with an eagerness that was both thrilling and terrifying. She began to feel a part of their small, warm world. She'd have their drinks ready the moment she saw them walking up to the diner, and Maya would run in and give her a drawing before she even slid into the booth. "You should come by the shop sometime," Marcus offered one Thursday as he paid the bill. "I'm working on an old grandfather clock. It's a real beast, but the chimes, they sound like a cathedral." "Your shop?" Ellie asked, her heart giving a little flutter. "Thorne's Fix-It. It's not much, just a little place over on Elm Street," he said with a self-deprecating shrug. "But it's mine. I'd like to show you." The invitation felt like more than just an invitation. It was an opening, a door to his world, and she wanted desperately to walk through it. "I'd love that," she said, her smile genuine for the first time in what felt like years. That night, alone in her sparse, anonymous apartment, she thought of the sterile opulence of her father's mansion. She remembered a dinner a few months before she'd left, seated at a 30-foot mahogany table. Her father had spent the entire meal discussing a hostile takeover, never once asking how she was. He spoke of people as pawns and companies as territories to be conquered. The silence between his pronouncements was heavier than any conversation. Comparing that cold, gilded cage to the image of Marcus, a man who found purpose and beauty in restoring a broken music box for his late wife, the contrast was a physical pain. She was choosing. With every shift she worked, with every conversation she shared with Marcus, she was choosing a different kind of life, a different kind of wealth. And it scared her more than anything. The following Saturday, Ellie found herself standing outside Thorne's Fix-It. The shop was small, tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. The front window was filled with an assortment of intriguing objects: a vintage radio, a disassembled typewriter, a collection of intricate pocket watches resting on velvet stands. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open, a small bell announcing her arrival. The air inside smelled of solder, wood polish, and something metallic and clean, like ozone after a storm. It was a scent of creation, of restoration. Marcus was at a large wooden workbench, a magnifying visor pushed up on his forehead, his brow furrowed in concentration as he manipulated a tiny gear with a pair of tweezers. He looked up, and his face broke into that same warm smile that always seemed to melt the ice around her heart. "Ellie, you came. You said something about a cathedral," she replied, her gaze sweeping over the organized chaos of the shop. Tools hung in neat rows on a pegboard, and shelves were lined with labeled drawers of screws, wires, and springs. It was a space of purpose, of quiet dedication. He led her to the back of the shop, where the grandfather clock stood, its dark wood gleaming. It was magnificent. "Almost there," he said, his hand resting gently on its side. "Just have to calibrate the pendulum." He opened the clock's face, revealing the impossibly complex dance of brass gears within. "People throw things like this away," he mused. "They think because it's old and broken, it's worthless. They don't see the craftsmanship, the history. They just want something new." His words resonated deep within her. She felt like that clock, old, broken on the inside, discarded by a world that only valued what was new and shiny. "My family. They're all about the new," she found herself saying, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. New deals, new acquisitions, new ways to prove they're on top. There's a lot of pressure to fit into that world, to be a certain way. It was the most she had ever revealed about herself, and the admission hung in the quiet air of the shop between them. Marcus didn't press for more. He simply nodded, his expression full of understanding. It's hard to hear your own chimes when everyone else is making so much noise. That simple analogy, that perfect understanding of her unspoken feelings, was more intimate than a touch. But the warmth of the moment was shattered later that week. A new customer appeared at the diner. He was handsome in a slick, predatory way, dressed in a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. He slid into a booth, his eyes scanning the room with an air of bored entitlement. When he saw Ellie, a flicker of recognition crossed his face, followed by a condescending smirk. "Well, well," he said as she approached with a menu. "I knew I'd seen you somewhere. The Vance Gala last year, wasn't it? You've certainly found a new calling." His name was Sterling Croft, a junior partner at a rival firm her father despised. He was the embodiment of the world she had run from. "Can I get you something?" Ellie asked, her voice tight, her posture rigid. "Just a coffee," he sneered. "And a little bit of perspective. It's a long way down from the penthouse, isn't it, Eleanor?" He said her full name like a weapon, and for the first time in months, she felt the cold dread of her old life closing in. Sterling became a fixture, a ghost from a life she was trying to escape. He would come in during her shifts, always sitting in her section, his presence a constant, unnerving reminder of who she was. He never overtly threatened her, but his harassment was a masterclass in subtle cruelty. He'd make comments just loud enough for others to hear. "Still slumming it, Eleanor?" Or, "Does Daddy know his little bird has flown so far from her gilded cage?" Each comment was a small cut, designed to unravel the fragile piece she was building. She handled it with the cold, polite detachment she'd been taught, a mask of indifference that hid the turmoil churning inside her. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. More importantly, she didn't want to bring this ugliness into the sanctuary she had with Marcus and Maya. One Thursday, Sterling was being particularly odious. Marcus and, Maya were in their booth, and Ellie could feel Marcus's eyes on her as Sterling held his empty coffee cup aloft, demanding a refill with a snap of his fingers. "Come on, sweetheart, chop chop. Some of us have empires to run, unlike the people in this establishment." His eyes flickered meaningfully towards Marcus. Ellie refilled his cup, her hand steady despite the tremor of rage she felt. As she turned away, she saw Marcus's jaw clench. His gaze, when it met Sterling's, was like flint. There was no overt threat, but the message was unmistakable. A quiet, powerful warning that Sterling, to his credit, seemed to understand. The smug look on his face faltered for a second. Later, as Marcus paid, he spoke to her in a low voice. "You don't have to take that from him, Ellie." "It's fine," she insisted, her voice a strained whisper. "Please, Marcus, don't get involved. Men like him, they feed on conflict. The best thing to do is ignore him. It'll only get worse if you confront him." She was pleading with him, terrified that the quiet, simple world she had found would be destroyed if it collided with the brutal, entitled one she had left behind. Marcus looked at her, his expression a mixture of concern and frustration. He didn't understand that in her world, confrontation wasn't about right and wrong. It was about power, and men like Sterling Croft always believed they held all the cards. He reluctantly agreed, but the protective fire in his eyes didn't die down. It just smoldered, waiting for a reason to ignite. The breaking point arrived on a busy Friday night. The diner was buzzing, a chaotic symphony of sizzling grills, clattering plates, and overlapping conversations. Ellie moved through it all with practiced efficiency, a small island of calm in the storm. And then Sterling Croft walked in, not alone this time, but with two equally arrogant friends. They were loud, obnoxious, and clearly several drinks into their evening. They took a booth in her section, and the torment began immediately. It was no longer subtle. Sterling was performing for his friends. He complained about the food, sent back a perfectly good steak, and made loud, disparaging remarks about the diner and its clientele. Ellie maintained her composure, her face an unreadable mask, her movements economical and precise. She just wanted them to eat, pay, and leave. Marcus and Maya were there, in their usual booth, watching. Maya was coloring, but Marcus's attention was fixed on the scene unfolding, his body tense, his hands resting on the table, fists loosely clenched. Then it happened. As Ellie reached to clear a plate, Sterling deliberately knocked his water glass over, drenching the table and splashing onto her apron. "Clumsy," he slurred, a vicious grin on his face. "You're not very good at this, are you?" He lunged forward and grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "You know, a pretty thing like you shouldn't be slinging hash in a place like this. I bet I could find a much better position for you. All you have to do is be nice to me." The diner fell silent. Every eye was on them. Ellie's manager, a timid man named Frank, hovered nearby, wringing his hands, clearly terrified of Sterling and his friends. Ellie felt a cold, paralyzing fear. This was it. The collision. Before she could even form a response, a voice cut through the silence, low and steady, yet carrying an authority that commanded the attention of the entire room. "Let her go." Marcus was standing by his booth. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't moved quickly. He had simply risen to his feet, a figure of absolute, immovable calm. Sterling laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He tightened his grip on Ellie's wrist. "Or what, pal? You going to file a complaint with the manager? I could buy this whole block and turn it into a parking lot by Monday." He turned his sneer back to Ellie. "Tell him to back off. Tell your little boyfriend who you are." He raised his voice, projecting to the silent watching room. "You people want to know who she is? This isn't just some waitress. Her father is Robert Vance. You think he wants his billion-dollar princess working in a dump like this? I'm doing him a favor by reminding her where she belongs." The name hung in the air, a stun grenade that left everyone speechless. Ellie felt the stares, the whispers starting up. She saw the shock on Frank's face, the awe and confusion on the faces of her regular customers. The walls were closing in. This was her nightmare. But then she looked at Marcus. He wasn't looking at her with shock or betrayal. He was looking at Sterling, his expression one of pure, undiluted contempt. And in that moment, something inside Ellie snapped. The fear, the shame, the years of hiding, it all burned away, replaced by a clean, white-hot fury. She wrenched her arm from Sterling's grasp. Her voice, when she spoke, did not tremble. It was clear and sharp as glass. "My father doesn't speak for me," she said, stepping away from Sterling and moving to stand beside Marcus. The gesture was instinctive, a declaration. "And you," she said, locking eyes with Sterling, "will not speak to this man, or to me, that way ever again." She stood shoulder to shoulder with Marcus, two people from different worlds, united against the ugliness Sterling represented. "This man," she continued, her voice ringing with conviction, "who fixes what is broken with his own two hands, who raises his daughter with more love and integrity than you could comprehend, is more of a gentleman in his little finger than you will ever be. He is worth more than your entire portfolio. Now get out of here, and don't ever come back." Sterling Croft, for the first time in his pampered life, was utterly speechless. He stared at her, then at the unyielding wall that was Marcus, and saw nothing but his own defeat. The whispers in the diner grew louder, a wave of judgment turning against him. Humiliation colored his face a deep red. Without another word, he turned and stalked out of the diner, his friends scrambling in his wake. The silence he left behind was profound. Then, someone in a corner booth started to clap. It was a slow, tentative sound, but it was quickly joined by another, and then another, until the small diner was filled with a soft, rolling applause. Ellie's legs felt like they might give out. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a deep, bone-weary tremor behind. She turned to her manager, who was gaping at her as if she'd grown a second head. She untied the strings of her stained apron, the symbol of her secret life, and folded it neatly. She placed it on the counter. "Frank, I quit," she said softly. She walked over to Marcus's booth, where Maya was looking between the two adults with wide, questioning eyes. Marcus's expression was unreadable, a complex mix of emotions she couldn't begin to decipher. "Can we go?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He simply nodded, took Maya's hand, and led them out of the diner, away from the stares and the whispers, and into the cool, quiet night. They walked in silence for a block, the sounds of the city a muted backdrop to the roaring in Ellie's ears. Finally, under the orange glow of a streetlight, Marcus stopped and turned to face her. "Eleanor Vance," he said, the name sounding foreign on his lips. "I'm sorry," she blurted out. "I should have told you. I wanted to be someone else. I wanted to be just Ellie." He looked at her, and there was no awe in his eyes, no greed, none of the reactions she had feared. There was only a deep, searching empathy. "Why?" he asked simply. And so, the truth came out. She told him everything, about the crushing weight of her father's expectations, the suffocating loneliness of a life where every relationship was a transaction, her desperate need to find something real, something she could build with her own hands, even if it was just a neatly stacked pile of clean dishes. He listened, his gaze never leaving her face. When she was finished, her story hanging between them in the night air, he reached out and gently touched her cheek. "Ellie," he said, his voice soft but firm. "The woman I've gotten to know these past few months. The one who makes my daughter laugh, who hangs her crooked drawings on the wall, who has sad eyes but the kindest heart I've ever known. That's who you are. The other stuff, the name, the money, that's just noise. You were hearing your own chimes all along." Tears she hadn't even realized she was holding back began to stream down her face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief, of being seen. He saw her, the real her, and he wasn't running away. He was standing right there. He leaned in, and his kiss was not the stuff of fairy tales. It was quiet and real, and full of a promise that this was not an ending, but the beginning of something true. 6 months later, the sign above the small shop on Elm Street had changed. It now read, "The Thorne and Vance Community Tech Center." Inside, the space was transformed. It was larger, brighter, with a row of workstations where Marcus now taught classes. He shared his skills with local kids, at-risk youth, and fellow veterans, teaching them how to repair electronics, how to build things, how to find purpose in restoration. Ellie hadn't just given him money, she had invested. Her business acumen, so long a tool for her father's cold empire, was now being used to build a community, to create opportunities, to help people put their own lives back together. On a warm Saturday afternoon, The three of them were in the park. Maya shrieked with laughter as a colorful kite, a dragon with bright streamers, dipped and soared in the breeze. Its wooden frame had snapped the week before, and she and Marcus had spent an evening in the workshop, carefully gluing it back together. Ellie watched Marcus help Maya with the string, his strong, gentle hands guiding hers. The sunlight caught the silver in his hair, and the smile on his face was the most valuable thing she had ever seen. He caught her watching and smiled, a look of such profound love and contentment that it filled every empty space inside her. In this simple, honest life, surrounded by the family she had chosen, she was finally, truly, rich. They had learned that the most important work was not in fixing broken objects, but in mending the broken pieces of each other, building a future that was stronger than anything they could have owned alone.